Your Dog's Friend is a nonprofit 501c3 whose mission is to help keep dogs out of shelters by educating and supporting their humans. We promote positive method of training and behavior modification through stress-free methods. As part of that mission, we offer free webinars like the one you're about to watch. Subjects range from dog behavior, stress-free training, and other tools to help you understand your relationship with your dog. If you liked the webinar, be sure to give us a thumbs up. Click the notification bell and subscribe to our channel. By subscribing, you'll be notified when future videos are posted. Now enjoy the webinar.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Surviving the Teenage Years, sponsored by Your Dog's Friend, a nonprofit 501c3 organization whose mission is to help keep dogs out of shelters by educating and supporting their humans. Since 2006, we've been promoting the use of positive dog training methods by hosting free webinars like this one, posting valuable resources on our website, offering affordable training classes in person and online, and providing free advice and referrals. I'm Nicole. I work at Your Dog's Friend and will be your host for today's webinar. Our speaker today is Juliana DeWillems. She's the founder and lead trainer of JW Dog Training, serving the Northern Virginia area, primarily Arlington and Alexandria. She's also in the faculty of the Karen Pryor Academy, a top program for positive dog trainers. Juliana has numerous qualifications, including Certified Dog Behavior Consultant, Karen Pryor Academy Certified Training Partner, and Tag Teach Level 1 Certified. She has presented a number of webinars for Your Dog's Friend, and we are always delighted to have her back. We are a nonprofit, so if you find this webinar helpful, please consider making a donation to help support our free webinars and other free resources. To donate, you can visit our website at yourdogsfriend.org and click on the donate button in the upper right-hand corner. We appreciate your support. All right, let's get started. I will turn it over to Juliana.
Great. Thank you so much, Nicole. All right, everybody. So surviving the teenage years, like Nicole said, my name is Juliana DeWillems. I am a dog trainer in the Washington, D.C. area, primarily Northern Virginia. And I have been a dog trainer for over a decade. I've gotten my hands on lots of dogs and lots of teenage dogs. So I feel like at this point, I've kind of cracked the code to figure out how to survive the teenage years and maybe even, dare I say, thrive. A lot of it's going to be kind of a mentality shift. You're not going to necessarily be able to magically change your teenager's behavior, which we'll talk about. But I think you're going to find a lot of this information in this talk today very helpful. Now, why did I want to do a talk about adolescence? I think that the concept of adolescence in dogs is actually not talked about enough, because we talk a lot about the puppy stage and how challenging the puppy stage is, and that once you get through the puppy stage, you're in the clear. Except unfortunately, that is not quite the case. After puppyhood comes adolescence, and you are hit with this whirlwind teenager who you ask yourself, wait a second, where did my sweet puppy go? And who is this teenage menace in my house? And this can really feel like whiplash to dog parents who, again, you've made it through puppyhood. You thought the sleepless nights were hard. You thought that shark teeth were hard. But then suddenly you have this being in your home who has insane needs, who has a lot of behavior changes that maybe are unexpected. So a lot of surviving adolescence comes down to education and understanding this phase and understanding what your dog is going through, and therefore having appropriate expectations for this phase as well. So that's what we're going to talk all about today. If you are mid-adolescent and you're feeling the whiplash, then hopefully you will also realize after this talk that what you're going through is probably very normal, and you are most definitely not alone. The behavior change that you are seeing in your adolescent dog might seem familiar, whether you've had teenage humans in your home or you've been a teenage human. All the changes that human teenagers go through, dogs go through in very similar ways when it comes down to the changes that are going on inside their body, the physical changes that they're going through, the behavioral changes. And the last time I gave this presentation was actually like 3 or 4 years ago. And some of my feelings about adolescence and the way I look at adolescence has changed. I used to kind of talk about the oh, the moody teenager, the teenager with attitude, like that's your dog right now. And I've kind of moved away from that. I don't like to label our adolescent dogs as like, uh, like rebellious or problematic or anything like that, because that doesn't really help us understand why they're behaving the way that they do. But with these photos, what all these kids have in common is that they've got very different priorities than probably the people around them. And they are probably experiencing a lot of changes in their life. So that's why I kept these pictures in, to help you kind of empathize and understand what your dog is going through right now. So when talking about adolescence, what does that mean? What age frame are we talking about? You've got your puppy, you start with your puppy and you end up in adulthood. So what happens between that is the adolescent phase. I'm going to talk with specific ages in the next slide, but it's pretty much this like 5 to 6 months to like 2 to 3 years that occurs again between puppyhood and adulthood. The tricky thing about this phase is that your dog has an adult body, but they still have their puppy/teenage brain. We can be very quick to put adult expectations on our adolescents because they look like grown-ups. We're like, you're in the grown-up body, you're an adult now, behave like an adult. When in reality, their brain is so far from this dog you see, this grown-up dog you see on the far side of the screen. Their body and their brain do not match. And that's really where the mismatched expectations starts, is that we as humans cannot compute that the dog we have in front of us that looks like an adult dog is nowhere near adulthood. You want to know specifically when to expect adolescence, because that is going to change depending on what size dog you have. It's less about breed and more about size. Smaller dogs are going to mature more quickly, meaning they're going to enter adolescence more quickly, and they're also going to grow out of adolescence more quickly. So around 5 months, your small breed dogs, maybe under 20, 25 pounds, are going to start being teenagers, and then they're going to mature closer to a year and a half. So the good news is you get in and out pretty quickly with a small dog. With a large dog, they're going to stay puppies, puppy mouthing, puppy behaviors for a little bit longer. And then between 5 and 6 months, they're going to head into adolescence. And that teenage phase with large breed dogs, your labs, your pitties, your shepherds, like all those big dogs, they stay teenagers for quite some time. I mean, you're looking at really like 2 to 3 years before you start seeing true adulthood and maturity. And this is, again, important to understand, because the more that you know what exact stage your dog is in, the more likely you will be to understand them and be able to empathize and know more about what they are going through. I thought that this study was very interesting. The title is "Dogs Endure Emotional Difficulties in Puberty Just Like Humans," that this one study says. Now, the thing about studies is they can find very interesting information. They don't necessarily prove anything, but they essentially have findings that we can then kind of talk about and look at and hopefully replicate to bring us more and more understanding about the topic. But what's important to understand is that your dog is going through physiological changes that very similar to what, again, human teenagers go through. Our dogs can experience them similarly. There are a lot of differences and there are a lot of similarities. One thing that I found very interesting about this study is this quote: "The dogs in this study are nearly twice as likely to ignore the sit cue when they are 8 months old as compared to when they are 5 months old." And what that tells you is that your puppy, who you've been doing a lot of training with and who really likes being near you and likes engaging with you and likes to do the things that you ask them to do, by the time that they hit adolescence, 6, 7, 8, 9 months old, their priorities have changed dramatically, and they are much harder to convince to do the behaviors that you want them to. And again, this is not because they are being spiteful or rebellious or manipulative or anything like that. They're simply going through so many changes that make all the things we as humans want them to do significantly, it really, we drop real low on their priority list. But I thought that this was so interesting that the teenagers were twice as likely to ignore the sit cue as the puppies in this particular study. I think that tells us a lot. A phrase that I like to use a lot when it comes to teenagers is their brain is offline a lot of the time, meaning they cannot access their thinking brain, usually due to how overexcited they are, how distracted they are, how focused they are on something else. And so their brain is inaccessible a lot of the time. And this is totally normal. The fact that they have a hard time paying attention, they have a hard time learning, they have a hard time responding to cues. If there's anything exciting going on, anything different going on, anything new, novel, their brain is going to be offline. And that is normal. I'm going to talk in a little bit about ways to get their brain back online, but there are just going to be some days with your teenager where their brain is offline. And you got to say, okay, today's an offline day. You know, we're just going to go sniff on a walk and do some enrichment at home. And instead of being like, no, your brain is offline and I needed to come back online and fighting against it, there are just going to be some days where you are up against your dog's developmental changes. And it is it's like survive the teenage years, subtitle, pick your battles, you know, because they're like, managing your expectations is one of the best things you can do, paired with understanding your dog. So if I'm, as a professional, telling you there are going to be days when your teenager's brain is offline and you can just roll with that. All right, it's an offline day. You're going to be significantly less frustrated with your dog, and both of you are going to make it through adolescence much smoother. Not totally smooth, but smoother. Behavior changes in your teenage dog are a guarantee. So again, I have this graphic of human teenagers, and the adult is like, hello, pay attention to me or do the thing I want you to do. And the teenager just has different priorities. The teenager has different needs. The teenager has social needs. The teenager has communication needs. The teenager has connection needs with their peers and in their, environment, very specific teenage environment. And so there's a clash there, but understanding that these behavior changes are going to happen is going to make them, again, a little bit easier. I'm not saying it's going to be totally smooth sailing, but again, having an understanding is going to help tremendously. So let's talk about the behaviors you can expect in your teenager. So exploring the world. Again, you had your puppy who was like, oh, I'm so happy to be near you. I'm so happy to follow you around. I can be off leash in the yard. 5 months, see ya, goodbye. They want to go check out this big wide world, and they are way less likely to want to stay close to you. So expect them to start to explore and want to spend less time with you. They're feeling more independent. They're not as interested in staying close. You are going to see a huge increase in chewing needs. So puppies chew because they are teething, and they also explore the world with their mouths. But then you get into kind of adolescent chewing that is very much like I'm so pent up. I have all this adolescent energy and I need to do something with it. And so if you don't give them chewing outlets, which I'll talk about, they will find things to chew up. So really keep that in mind. They've got a big chewing need. They might be jumping more. So a lot of people might label that like impulse control, where they just have less patience. They have less impulse control. Those are all kind of human constructs, but we can think about them in the context of our dogs, that they're like, oh, I want that. Boom. And they go for it. So you might see them jumping more when they didn't as puppies. You might see more barking, whether that's barking at home or barking at you at home, barking at their dog friends. You just might see more barkiness during adolescence. Again, we've got all this adolescent energy, and it needs to go somewhere. And unfortunately, a lot of the time it goes out the barking. And then you also see them a lot of times sleeping less, even though they need more sleep. So again, puppies were like sleep hard, play hard, but as teenagers, they start to lose that interest in sleeping. They don't know necessarily how tired they are. Same thing with puppies, but it gets worse as adolescents because they're like, no, I don't want to miss out on anything. The FOMO gets way spiked up as teenagers. So they are sleeping way less, but they need more sleep. And I'm going to tell you how to make sure they're getting enough sleep. So if you look at all these behaviors, like, wow, that sure sounds like a lot of unwanted, annoying dog behavior, which, yes, in the human world, on its face, these behaviors are not ideal and they are totally normal. So we need to figure out ways to kind of work with our dogs and with our adolescents to help them with these behaviors, not constantly say to them, stop doing that, stop doing that, stop doing that, because that is going to frustrate everyone. You cannot wish these behaviors away from your adolescent. So if these are the behaviors that you're seeing, a lot of them are attached to your dog's needs. So your dog can be jumpier and chew on more stuff and be barkier if their dog canine needs have not been met. Canine needs are really like built-in physiological, built-in biological needs. That's the word. Like they're dog needs that all dogs come with hardwired with at least some of these. But they're generally universal dog needs and they really spike up during adolescence. So physical exercise, chewing, mental exercise, sniffing, sleeping. What I would also add to this is social needs. So a lot of adolescent dogs actually need play with other dogs. And that's a huge need of theirs. And then, yeah, social time with you as well, humans. So this is where like there's some harmful advice on the internet to like keep your dog locked in their crate a lot of the time, or like on their place a lot of the time, and then only let them out for certain activities. That can be harmful for a number of reasons. But even if you just think about how social dogs are and they need time with you. So you keeping these needs at the forefront of your mind when helping your adolescent, again, is going to make your life easier, because most unwanted behaviors as adolescents, or as all dogs really, are the result of an unmet need. So we'll go through each of them individually, and I'll tell you how you can do your best to meet each need. So exercise. Adolescents need aerobic exercise where they are heavy breathing and they are getting their blood pumping and they're stretching their legs. We often think that a dog walk is good exercise for our dogs, and there are a lot of benefits to walks. Walking alone, especially on a 4 or 6 foot leash, is absolutely not enough for an adolescent dog. Not enough at all. What is enough and what can be a kind of well-rounded exercise is off-leash time, or I'll talk about it in the next slide, but on a long line. But running, you need to get your adolescent dog running, because this walk on the left side of the screen is not enough and will leave your dog with excess energy and with needing more exercise, and it's gonna maybe lead them to be bored, to just have pent-up energy, which can lead to destruction. So you need to make sure that your adolescent is getting running and stretching their legs and getting their blood moving. Now, how do we do that safely? So Sniff Spots are a really great option. Sniff Spot is an app that you can download, and it's like the Uber for yards, where in that you can reserve yards in your area, fenced yards where you can take your dog safely off leash. Because if you've looked at all, there aren't always safe fenced areas easily accessible. So I encourage you to look that up, because that can really be a game changer for your adolescent. Because I have on here, third, Dog parks are an option, but you have to be extremely careful. Not all dog parks are created equal. Many dog parks, dare I say most dog parks, risk doing more harm than good just because of the sheer number of dogs that can be there. And then unfortunately, the temperaments of dogs that can be in there, paired also with a lack of understanding of the body language and behavior. It can be kind of the perfect storm for something really bad to happen to your teenager, or like best case scenario, they just learn a bunch of kind of like not great behaviors. So be very wary. But I don't want to write off all dog parks, because some dog parks, so like smaller neighborhood dog parks where everybody knows each other, dog parks that you can find times where maybe there's only one or two other dogs or no other dogs. What a great opportunity to let your dog out to sniff, play, stretch their legs in a safe fenced area if there are no other dogs there. So be very, very mindful and thoughtful and cautious if you do choose dog parks. Like I said before, adolescent dogs often do have a social need. So they do need to play with other dogs, but I would usually recommend making sure that their playmates are dogs dogs they're familiar with, that they can build relationships with, get one or two other dogs together and go to a sniff spot together. So make sure you're meeting that need, but doing it in a safe way. So just be very, very cautious if you're choosing to do dog parks. If you don't have a safe fenced area, you can just drag a long line. So make sure you buy a 20 or 30-foot leash. Biothane is a great material because it's easy to wash. It slips over ground very easily. So hikes or outings to big fields on long lines can be great and safe. A great way to let your dog stretch their legs without being totally off leash. And then this toy called a flirt pole can be awesome for adolescents because you can really get your dog running. And I wish I had a video of this. I know I have some on my Instagram, but if you just Google like flirt pole dog, videos and examples will show up and you'll see how awesome they can be. This video is an example of a teenage dog who we have on a drag line who we're practicing recall with. And you don't have to hear the audio, I'll talk through it. But what a great way to get this dog running and practice some training. So both people have treats. We practiced his recall at home and now we've taken it to a field and they are just calling the dog back and forth. And this is excellent exercise and training for this young dog. You can see he's dragging his leash. We were here for just training. If we were here, for more exercise, I'd have them have a 20 or 30-foot leash on. But again, really a win-win there. Chewing. So what's really important to understand about meeting your dog's needs is you want to make sure you're balancing them out. So you go to the park, you have a really awesome runaround session, your adolescent dog is really tired. You want to balance that out with calming activities and calming enrichment. So chewing is a great option for this. These are some examples of things your dog can chew on. I do want to say that chewing is always going to be risk versus reward. The veterinarians will tell you there are risks that come with having your dog chew hard things. And as a trainer, I completely agree with that. And dogs need to chew or they're going to chew up your house. So it's all about making sure that you find safe chews that you're comfortable with. Bully sticks come with these great holders now, so the choking hazard is significantly decreased. We realize rawhide isn't great, so now they make these things called no-hide beef chews. You can let your dog shred boxes, Amazon boxes, frozen raw marrow bones. Those are usually really high value, can be really good, like if you're having guests over to help you keep your dog calm. Chewing can even include ripping up stuffies and going to town on their toys. Don't discourage that type of destruction because, I mean, if it's like on a pillow or something, or again, on your couch, you can interrupt and redirect them. But generally, don't stop them from ripping up their toys or wanting to rip up something that you gave them to play with, because that means that they don't care about, carrying the stuffy around. They care about destroying it. That's what they'd much prefer to do. So let them. Meeting their chewing and destruction and shredding needs is so important. Because here's the thing. Here is the thing. You do not want to create a super athlete. So while you are going to practice getting your dog out and making sure they're getting their exercise needs met, you're going to balance it with chewing. And licking can also fall under this category. Anything that kind of falls under the enrichment category is going to be really important. Sniffing is also very important for your adolescent dog. Making sure that, again, you're balancing out all the high intensity, fun, exciting exercise with sniffing, calming their heart rate. Let them sniff a bunch on walks. If they're sniffing, they're not pulling. If they're sniffing, they're not, yanking you over to go say hi to the other dog. So really consider, try to let your dog sniff as much as you can, really. If you let your adolescent dog, if you can't take them for like a run in the morning before work, a sniff walk can be extremely beneficial. You're, like I said, you're not meeting their exercise needs on a 4-foot leash, like trying to march them down the street. So you might as well skip that and just let them sniff for 30 minutes. Whoo, they'll come back chill. Very, very good. Very important. Okay, so this is where like the enrichment mental exercise comes in. All of this is enrichment, all of it. Running around out in nature, chewing, sniffing, but also other enrichment is like food puzzles, sniffing games, frozen Kong, slow feeders. These are all also enrichment that use like problem solving, sniffing, seeking, searching, finding, all really good. I had here, this is where like I've changed some of my mindset around this. I used to say in this slide, like, no more food bowl. And I changed it to less food bowl because for a number of reasons. One, it is great to have your dog, quote unquote, work for their food as long as it is relatively easy for them to figure it out. If your dog is so hungry in the morning and you give them this like the hardest food puzzle, or like you give them a frozen thing that's going to take them 30 minutes to even thaw the top, that can be really frustrating for them. And especially like eating is a basic need. So I think it's very important to use enrichment for meal times, and you don't want to make it too frustrating or challenging for them because you don't want to have any conflict or frustrating feelings around enrichment. But like a slow feeder bowl, an easy or medium food puzzle, a Kong that is thawed, these are all great options. So we have a question in the chat that I think is relevant to what we just talked about. Dan asks, I have gotten a lot of pushback from my partner about taking our 8-month-old puppy on jogs with me, as it might possibly not be good for his joints. Any feedback on this? When you mention running, are you talking about more running around in a field other than jogging along on the street? So essentially, like when we're talking about running with adolescents, how careful should we be? First of all, question for your vet. I absolutely don't want to speak specifically to like exercise versus joints versus growth plates versus development, all of that. I too have heard the advice that you want to be very, very careful about, I would say, like repetitive exercise on hard surfaces. So a dog who's kind of like loping around and galloping around in a field, so a soft surface, and is starting and like, going slow, going fast, running this way. That's repetitive over and over on pavement. Same thing with like, a grass field versus a tennis court. Tennis courts can be great because they're fenced in. I didn't tell you that. Please use your common sense. Don't like go on the tennis court when people are wanting to use it. But they can be a great option, especially if you're in a city. So be thoughtful, talk to your vet. And I am not encouraging like straight running for an extended period of time. I want like nice big open field running how they feel comfortable. Great question. Okay, Jane asks, are nylobones too hard? So now we're talking back to chewing. Are nylobones too hard? We use them a lot, but now wonder if they are too hard of a chew. Nylobones are plastic. I generally don't use or recommend them. They are quite hard. Honestly, mostly because the dogs that I don't have dogs that are super interested in nylobones, just because they don't like taste like anything. They're just plastic. Again, a better question for your vet. I have unfortunately heard the advice, like you have to be able to indent it with your thumbnail. But if that's the case, like a lot of these chews are off the table. So again, it's risk versus reward, and ask your vet. Hannah asks, how do you balance sniffing versus controlled walks when training loose leash walking? I don't want to lose our progress, but I definitely want to just let him be a dog and sniff. We don't have access to a yard all the time, so he has to be leashed around the neighborhood most of the time. So I don't talk about this in here, but because my God, I could talk about loose leash walking forever and ever. But one huge difference I recommend, and I do, this is really, really like take nothing away, like meet your dog's needs and use a longer leash for your adolescent dog. So standard leashes are either 4 or 6 feet. You will find walks to be so much more enjoyable if you use an 8 or a 10-foot leash with your dog, especially for neighborhood walks. Like if you're out on a hike, do longer, but I really love an 8 or a 10-foot leash. It gives them just a little bit more space. And by the way, if they have more leash length, they don't hit the end of the leash as frequently. So longer leash for walks can make a big difference, paired with some of the stuff that we'll talk about training in a few slides, which is essentially like capturing attention, check-ins, being close to you, that type of thing. And with adolescents, I would prioritize meeting needs and letting them be a dog at this phase while doing maybe like really specific training elsewhere. Yeah, if we have time, I'll talk about that more at the end. While we've talked a lot about how to keep your dog physically fulfilled and enriched and busy and not bored, all this stuff, we have to also balance that out with sleeping. So how much your dog sleeps is directly linked to their behavior and may or may not be the way that you think. If your dog is not getting enough sleep, they will be significantly worse. I have seen adolescents who are super barky, bitey, mouthy, jumpy, like just generally irritable and a lot, who do a 180 once they get enough sleep during the day. Again, we get these puppies who every 2 hours, they're going down in the crate, they're getting their structured naps. And then again, 5 or 6 months, oh, you're a grown-up, you don't need to sleep as much. Wrong. They need to sleep. Adolescents need to sleep so much. I like 2 big nap chunks during the day, like a nice mid-morning nap, a nice mid-afternoon nap, and then making sure they get really good sleep overnight. If they're up a lot, that's going to be challenging for you. So do your best to create nap, like Zen times, nap zones during the day. So make sure that they've got a quiet environment. You can use calming music or a white noise machine. And then utilize the crate, or not a tether so much, but like a pen or even just a specific room that they associate with just being calm and falling asleep. If you try to just let your adolescent dog fall asleep wherever and say, oh, if you're tired, you'll sleep, that's really going to backfire. You really want to try to have kind of structured sleep times and sleep routines and sleep environments is really going to help you make sure that they're getting enough sleep. That goes into this piece that is generally like, be as predictable as you can and consistent and as you can with your dog's routine. Dogs can often benefit from predictability and consistency and just like, okay, now I know when we're going to eat, and then we're going to go for a walk, and then I'm going to have some downtime, and then I'm going to have playtime. So making sure that you do your best to give your dog some type of consistent, predictable routine can really help them. Of course, not everybody's life lends itself to being super regimented, and I think that's okay. Just keep in mind that however much consistency you can maintain can be very helpful. Management. So management, we're moving kind of out of like meeting your dog's needs and now kind of some general concepts with adolescents. Management is the concept of changing the environment to change your dog's behavior. Not changing your dog's behavior to change your dog's behavior, but changing the environment around them to change their behavior. So this looks like, it's hard for you to tell, but there's this a gate in front of these shoes here, and this happy adolescent who looks like he's ready to just break right into those shoes. So they put just a gate up in front of this stuff in front of on like their front foyer so that he doesn't get into it. To keep your adolescent dog out of the kitchen using a gate. So you're not teaching your dog to stay out of the kitchen. You are just using a physical barrier to keep them out. And hey, it gets the job done. Same thing. They've got this shoe bin and they just put something metal on top of it, or like this metal gate on top of it so the dog can't get into the shoes, using a covered trash can. So making sure that you are really managing the environment. I mean, management in adolescence, you practiced a lot of management in puppyhood. We all got really good at like using pens and using putting gates up and closing doors. Like, don't let the puppy go pee in the dining room, and then again, adolescent comes along and we're like, oh, they're old enough now. We don't need that. Again, not quite. You want to really, really, really heavily manage their environment. I love management so much that I wrote a whole book about it. So this is my book, Manage It, Hacks for Improving Your Dog's Behavior. This is a whole book about this concept of management. Basically, like easy ways to change your dog's behavior that either require no training or very little training. And this is a great book to supplement any training information you do seek out. But I feel so strongly that management is like the key to loving life with your dog that, again, I wrote a whole book about it. So I would love for you to learn more about this topic by checking out my book. Now, let's talk about actually changing your dog's behavior through more training. So in order to change your dog's behavior, you have to have an understanding of your dog's needs, which we already talked about, an understanding of how behavior works. How does learning work when it comes to changing our dog's behavior? You need to be consistent to the best of your ability, and you need to have patience. And I tell you what, you need a lot and a lot and a lot of patience. I don't know if you've noticed yet, but a lot of helping dogs be successful is learning how to regulate your own emotions and deal with your own frustrations in the moment. I'm not telling you you're not going to get frustrated. I'm telling you that it will be beneficial to learn how to take a breath before you engage with your dog in these moments where they're driving you crazy, because how you respond can significantly impact, one, the behavior you see, and two, your relationship with your dog. So the more patient that you can be and the more understanding you can be, the easier that this very challenging phase will be. An important concept that you need to understand is that reinforcement, so the reinforcement part of positive reinforcement drives behavior. Behavior occurs because it is reinforced in some way. What that means is you have a behavior, anything your dog does. And by the way, anything you as a human does. Reinforcement drives all beings' behaviors. And you add reinforcement, and I use kind of the concept of money, like when you pay your dog for something or when you get paid for something, although that's a very simplified version of reinforcement. We also call this a reward. When you have a behavior, you add a reward to it, you will see an increase in the behavior. And if you think that you have a behavior that you are adding a reward to and you are not seeing an increase in the behavior, then actually what you think is a reinforcement is not serving as a reinforcement. So in order to see more of a behavior, you have to reward it. And if you're not seeing more of a behavior you want, you are not rewarding it enough or in the right way. And if you're seeing a behavior that you don't want, it's because it is being rewarded and reinforced in some way. So your job as the human being with a developed frontal lobe and opposable thumbs is to make what your dog wants to do less reinforcing than what you want them to do. So, hey, I know you want to go and chase that squirrel over there, but man, if you stick with me, I'm going to get your squeaky toy and I'm going to give you the best game of tug and chase you've ever had. All behaviors under the contingencies of reinforcement and punishment. And so again, you really need to think about what behavior you want to see from your dog and make that behavior as reinforcing as possible. A challenge that people get into when they try to use positive reinforcement is that they don't necessarily understand what is truly reinforcing to their dog. There's a lot of things that can be reinforcing. Play can be reinforcing. Touching your dog, talking to your dog, this can all be reinforcing. When it comes to changing behavior, food is some of the easiest and most effective reinforcement to use because it's easy to access. Dogs love it. Dogs are biologically designed to like food. And we can use a good amount of it in a quick time time frame and get a lot of good repetitions in. So it's just basically easy and accessible to use, which is why I recommend it for the majority of your training and behavior change through adolescence. But not all food and not all treats are created equal. So if you're trying to use this boring $3 value milk bone to get your dog to stop running up to, Susie the neighbor who they love so much, you're not going to have any luck. So you have to match how valuable your food is to how challenging the behavior is that you are asking for. So this $3 milk bone, maybe you can get away with using it inside your home. You're doing your training in the evening, a little bit of mental stimulation, and you can use it inside your home and your dog will work for it under those pretty boring conditions. Then you up the ante just a little bit to medium value treats, maybe something like Zook's training treats or whatever training treats you get at the store. And that you might get away with using that in the neighborhood. So a little bit of a more distracting environment. And so you up the ante a little bit. But you bring out the big guns when you have people over, your dog's favorite people, your dog loves having guests over, or maybe they're a little afraid of having guests over. And so you have to bring out a treat that is valuable enough to compete with your guests' presence. Keep that in mind. If you're wanting a harder behavior in a harder environment, you have to bring out more exciting treats. Be also careful about using your really exciting treats when you're only at home and it's boring and there's no distractions. Because then what happens when you have guests come over or you see another dog on the street and suddenly your dog's like, I don't care about those hot dogs. I got those at home. See ya, I'm out of here. So it's about motivation and reinforcing behaviors in a very strategic way. Adolescence is not the time. I repeat, big flashing lights, not the time to fade out using treats. Just plan to use treats all through adolescence. You're going to wake up during adolescence. Every day is going to be different. Your dog is you have no idea what version of your dog is going to wake up in the crate or in the bed that morning. So if you can rely on the consistency of treats and some of your easy behaviors, just do that. Do not make your life harder and try to wean off treats earlier than your dog can handle. Remember, teenage brain may or may not be online. Treats are going to be a really great way to get the behaviors you want and build the habits that you want. Wendy, I covered the age range for adolescents at the beginning, so it'll be really helpful when you go back to watch the YouTube. You'll be able to learn all about the age range for adolescents. It's generally super general, 6 months to 2 years. So this is an example of you're building loose leash walking with a really high rate of reinforcement, meaning you're really feeding frequently. And you think to yourself, am I going to have to feed this frequently forever? I'm feeding so much. No, you're not. Over time, you're going to work towards a nice, strong behavior that can last a long time between treats. Adolescence might not be the time for that. It will come in adulthood. Adolescence is not the time to start trying to wean off of how many treats you're using. A strong reinforcement history. So literally how many treats you give your dog for a specific behavior is what builds strong habits. And this is really important to understand. Your dog, the way that they respond to you, to your cues, is less about what you have for them or what you give them in the moment. And it is more about what you've given them every other time prior to that they have done the behavior. So if you've given your dog a treat every time they respond to their name, 100 times in the last 2 months, and then you say their name one day, they're going to think about, what normally happens when they say my name? I'm going to run over and I'm going to show up because I know I'm likely to get something tasty. Be really proactive about bad behavior. I have bad in quotes because bad is, first of all, our dogs are not moral. They don't know good and bad. Bad is a construct that we put on them. So I typically use the term unwanted or undesirable. But I know you all use bad behavior, so I'll go with it. Just keep in mind who's putting this good and bad morality on our dog's behavior. First thing you want to do, you can create a list of behaviors that you don't like, just get real clear about them. And then you can ask yourself, what unmet need is driving this behavior? Just like we talked about at length at the beginning, chewing, sleeping, exercise, social time, enrichment overall, like what could potentially be the reason that my dog is behaving this way? Do they have an unmet need in this moment or consistently in this setting? Brainstorm how you can meet that need through more desirable behavior choices. Okay, Fluffy, I know that you really love to say hi to me when you get home, but let me have you meet me on the couch so that we're saying hi without you jumping up and leaping on me. Or, okay, I know that you want to go see your friend when we walk up to them on leash. Let's practice you taking treats as we walk up so that you stay near me and you don't pull me over. So you want to think about what desirable behavior you want instead, and then you want to prevent the undesirable behavior from happening. That's through management. So you're going to change the environment. You're going to be really thoughtful about how you set your dog up to behave through their environment. We're not expecting good choices at this age. Like, we're not expecting our dog to make the choice we want them to, because they often can't. Where that's a huge part of adolescence, is understanding you might want your dog to not pull you over when you get to, close to that other dog, but they're probably at this age going to pull you over. So maybe don't go as close to that other dog. Like, make choices that set your adolescent up for success. And then, of course, reinforce the desirable behavior that you want a lot over time. Reward it frequently, reward it consistently, and do it over time, knowing that you're building behavior. You're really investing in your future every time you reinforce a behavior. There are a handful of behaviors, pretty much the 4 behaviors that I have here that I think you can get away with focusing pretty much on these 4 behaviors and make it through adolescence. Of course, you can teach your dog all sorts of fun stuff, tricks, sit, stay, down, all these things. But if you focus on nothing else, if you focus on these behaviors, I think you're actually going to have a good amount of success, because what these 4 behaviors are essentially behaviors that just teach your dog, your teenage dog, to pay attention to you. Like, hey, I'm over here, and good stuff happens when you pay attention to me. So that's really what is behind all these foundation behaviors that I'm going to go through, which is capturing attention, teaching your adolescent to respond to their name, having another way to get their attention called a positive interrupter, and then a hand target behavior called touch. I'm going to go through each of these. But again, I don't necessarily think you need to teach anything advanced or, jump through any hoops to get your adolescent dog to behave differently. If you essentially teach your adolescent, like, if you pay attention to me, both when I ask you to and when you just choose to, good stuff happens. Again, it is much more manageable. This is a short video. Unfortunately, there's no sound to it, but just demonstrating the ways that you can get your dog's attention. So you've got a positive interrupter. You're going to make or you can say their name. That gets their attention. You can use a hand target. That gets their attention. And then you can also use a hand signal to get their attention and offer you eye contact. There actually are endless ways to get your dog's attention, and focusing on those, giving yourself a lot of different options to build attention from your teenager, is going to really help you. So I do not anywhere near have the time to really dive into how to teach this stuff. I'm mostly giving you ideas for what to work on and what it looks like. And then you will go forth and either look on Instagram or YouTube or talk to your trainer about how to build some of these skills. But so I'm just really kind of scratching the surface on these things. This is a technique called capturing, where I'm just going to capture this dog's attention when she chooses to give it to me. I'm actually not asking for it. I'm not saying anything. I'm not saying her name. If she just chooses to follow me, she gets a click, which marks the behavior, and then a little treat. And soon enough, I have a dog who won't leave my side and who will choose to engage with me no matter what I'm doing. You can see I gave a lot of treats there. Another thing that I didn't talk about in the treat section is teeny tiny treats, because we are going to be feeding frequently. But I haven't said a thing to this dog in this 40-second clip, and she was glued to me. So if you just capture your dog for paying attention to you, you want to start at home and then take it on the road, that can solve a lot of your problems if they choose to stick with you regardless of what's going on around them. So also teaching your dog to respond to their name. This is the steps for introducing that behavior. This dog's name is Biscuit.
Biscuit. Biscuit. Biscuit. Biscuit. Biscuit.
So I first just paired her name with food, and now I'm actually waiting for her to pick her head up when I say her name.
Biscuit. Good girl.
And you might be thinking to yourself, okay, my dog knows their name, like, okay, my dog will follow me around sometimes. Like, what do you mean that's the key to adolescence? But I'm telling you, if you can really, really, really strengthen these responses so that they occur no matter what's going on around your dog, you can solve a lot of your problems. Imagine like your adolescent dog is, running after something or run out the door or something, and you say their name and they do a U-turn and come back. Great, problem solved. So do not underestimate the power of these simple exercises. This is an example of just using a dog's name to get their attention in real life.
Milo. Yeah, good job, kiddo.
So you really want to try to aim for that head whip response that they'll whip around because they think their name is the best thing ever, which by the way, this is a big reason why you don't want to use your dog's name to reprimand them, because you want this head whip turn that your dog knows something good will happen. You don't ever want your dog to associate their name with being punished or corrected or getting in trouble, because that's a great way to unfortunately teach them over time to, I don't want to go near them if they're saying my name. Those consequences get iffy sometimes, so it's a big reason to really keep your dog's name as a positive thing for them. And so another way to get your dog's attention is called a positive interrupter. So this is basically like a nonverbal auditory cue that gets your dog's attention. That can be, we want to teach it to them, and it's also something that will naturally get their attention. So you've got a kissy noise, like you've got like a whistle. You've got words like pop, 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 pop. You've got a tongue click. You have a lot of options for getting your dog's attention. That's not just their name, because what we don't want to also do is just say their name over and over and over again. You need to have another way to get their attention. So this is an example of a positive interrupter.
Good boy.
Or I said, pop, pop. There was a kissy noise.
Good boy.
Use the hand target.
Good boy.
So I just got him to turn with me, engage with me, turn and sit in front of me without ever saying his name. And by the way, without saying a sit cue. I had his total attention and I've captured his attention a bunch. And I've also told him that if I make a noise, make a fun sound, to come over and get good stuff from me. It really builds very reliable behavior this way. All right, this is an example of using a hand target. So touch is where your dog learns to touch their nose to your hand as a target. Touch is a really incredible tool. You'll see it used here while I'm just walking to redirect the dog where I want her to go.
Good girl.
So she knows to touch her nose to my hand. And touch can be used to move your dog from point A to point B. Touch can be used to move your dog into a specific direction. There are a lot of different ways to use touch. It's a really, really beneficial skill to teach. And this one has a lot of probably good and easy tutorials on YouTube. It's very easy to learn. Your dog will learn very quickly. Oh, if I just touch their hand, I get a cookie. Very good. In general, with your adolescent, you really want to practice a yes mindset and think about and notice all the things that they do well. And if you have something that you don't like, try to brainstorm what you want them to do instead, because you can't do a don't. You can't you can't constantly tell your dog, stop doing that, stop doing that, stop doing that. That's not information about what you want them to do instead. And that's just really frustrating. That's not a fun life to live together if you're constantly on them about what they're doing wrong. Notice and think about what you want them to do right. So for example, instead of jumping, okay, I don't like when my dog jumps on guests. Well, what do you want them to do instead? Hey, standing as guests come in is perfectly fine. Great. Instead of barking during meals, do this instead. Hey, instead of barking at us while we're eating, can you lie on your bed and work on your own Kong? Great. Instead of pulling on leash, do this instead. Hey, can you stay close enough to me where there's no tension on the leash? Great. Remember, with these do this instead behaviors, you're going to reward all of those so that your dog is motivated and incentivized to do those instead. It really creates a much more peaceful dynamic because, again, when you're constantly frustrated with your dog and annoyed with them and wondering why they're not behaving differently, again, that's just a hard way to live. And you don't have to live like that. That's the great news. You can really start to change your mindset to look at what they're doing well and what you like that they're doing. And suddenly life gets a lot easier. Keep in mind, behavior deteriorates around distractions, and everything, I repeat, everything is a distraction for your adolescent dog. So understand that your dog might sit really well at home, or they might pay really good attention at home. But then when you get outside into the park, goodbye, brain offline. And that's a matter of training. So systematically training around more distractions and waiting until they're just a little bit older to be able to handle distractions. It's not really being able to cope with challenging distractions is a tall order for adolescent dogs. It's not impossible. It just takes really thoughtful training. But really keep this in mind. Like any of these distractions, of course, your teenager, your adolescent dog is, of course, they're going to engage in these distractions instead of responding to you. So really keep that in mind and make thoughtful decisions. Maybe don't walk your kid down the candy aisle if you don't want them asking for candy. Those types of decisions to really set your dog up for success. Some general tips for training your adolescent dog. You might be surprised to hear that short sessions are great. 3 to 5 minutes. That's all you need. You do not need to be training your dog for 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes. In fact, stretching for longer and longer, it might backfire. Dogs get tired, they aren't as successful. So short sessions are great. And short sessions are much more doable in your busy life. 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes in the evening, that's doable, right? And that provides really important mental stimulation for your dog as well. Don't underestimate the power of the basics and those foundations we just talked about, because like I said, those 4 kind of attention getting behaviors, if you can make those really strong, you've got a leg up on a lot of challenging behaviors. And just in general, keep it fun. Your training can be extremely fun. It can be a bonding activity. It can be something you both enjoy. It does not have to be, forceful. It doesn't have to be challenging. Training can be fun, and you actually get better results when you make training enjoyable for your dog. When thinking about where to go for training help, so private training is great, one-to-one training. My company, JW Dog Training, we offer in-home training in Arlington and Alexandria, Virginia, and then virtual training worldwide. I highly recommend you check out the Your Dog's Friend resource list for finding a trainer if you're in the DMV. You generally want to look for a certified dog trainer. So KPA CTP, IAABC, that will help you make sure that you're getting a trainer who's going to use very kind, humane methods with your dog. Group classes can be a great option for adolescents. Group classes are a really nice way to systematically add distractions. You're working around other dogs. You've got a curriculum you're following. So if you can find the right group class for you and your dog, those can be extremely beneficial. You can move up to new levels. Great. Coming in January 2025, I'm actually launching my own dog training app. So if you enjoyed the information you learned here and kind of my teaching and training style, I am launching an app for the average dog guardian to try to make really good training information more affordable, easier to do with your limited time. If you follow me on Instagram, I've got a bunch of free tips on there. And so if you want to stay updated about when that is happening, follow me on Instagram. And if you're watching this on YouTube after January 2025, you can find Dog Training Plus, my app, in the App Store, both Google and Apple. So I know that training, especially private training, can be really, it can be costly. It can be really, really helpful to really get that one-on-one support, but I understand it's costly. So you've got a bunch of options. Group classes are also often more affordable and very, very effective. So a lot of good options out there to make sure that you're getting good guidance for your adolescent dog. Generally, hopefully I've hit it home tonight that I really recommend you stay patient and positive with your adolescent. You might be tempted to reach for tools that make you feel like you have more control or really shuts down some of those behaviors that you're seeing. And I just want to caution you in doing that, reaching for prong collars or shock collars, e-collars at this phase, because a lot of what you're seeing is really normal. And a lot of the challenging behaviors, if you stay consistent and stay positive with your guidance, your dog will grow out of. And if you reach for some of those harsh tools at this age, you risk coming out of the other side of adolescence with a not as good of a relationship with your dog as you could if you stayed more positive and empathetic to them. So I really urge you to just dig deep in your patience and your empathy, and remember, your dog is going through so much during this phase. And while you're having a hard time with them, they are also having a hard time. So it is a temporary phase that you will get through. After adolescence, you get to enjoy adulthood. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel. You are working towards a really nice adult dog, especially when you stay consistent. And towards that, like, 1.5 years, 2 years, if you have a bigger dog, you start to see these days where you're like, wow, that was like a lot easier. And I tell my clients, yeah, that's your highlight reel. That's your highlight reel of what to come. As your dog gets older, they're kind of shifting out of adolescence into adulthood. You get these like really nice moments where you're like, oh my gosh, this is what we're working towards. So fear not, it is coming. The days will get easier and the hard days will get fewer and far between. So quick takeaways that we talked about: making sure that you're meeting your teenage dog's needs first before any other interventions. Utilize management, manage their environment, excuse me. Stay calm with your dog, patient and consistent. Prioritize positive reinforcement training. And just remember, this too shall pass. This is a temporary phase. It is a challenging phase, and it does not last forever. So keep that in mind and manage your expectations and know that you and your dog will get through it together. So we're going to dive into questions. Okay. This is a good question. Wendy asks, it rarely happens, but when a pee accident happens in the house or even something is chewed that wasn't supposed to be, what is the appropriate reaction for us humans? And what do we do with them to curb the activity? So basically, like, your adolescent does something that you don't want them to do, and how do you handle it? So I really urge you to basically, I was going to make a joke about gentle parenting. I don't know if that would land, but basically you want to just redirect your dog calmly to whatever you want them to do instead. If you catch them in the moment, if the accident has happened, the thing has already been chewed, that is not a learning moment. The moment has passed. Your dog has no idea what they did if you were to try to convey information to them that you didn't like that. So at that point, you go to yourself, okay, like, what happened? What management fail happened that my dog had access to that room? Or did I not take them was there too long, asking them to hold their bladder? Like, did they chew something because they or have some pent up energy. Were they bored? Did they have some anxiety? So you want to figure out maybe why it happened, and then curbing the behavior would mean addressing that need and preventing that scenario from playing out in the future. Because something to think about is that, well, yes, you are basically at this age bending over backwards to make sure your dog behaves the way you want them to. You're helping them build good habits and build the habits that you want them to have into adulthood for the rest of their life. So you're putting a lot of effort into helping them be successful now to make sure that you don't have to be doing a lot later in life once they're older and past adolescence. You can back off on a lot of this management and support, and you have these really positive habits in place. Nicole asks, my dog experienced new anxiety and resource guarding around 8 months. Are there any other behavioral windows they can experience during adolescence? Nicole, this is a really good question. Adolescence is a time of so many changes that you can see behaviors start to pop up that you didn't see in puppyhood, and they can be due to any number of things. So fear periods are something that can happen during adolescence, meaning your dog suddenly becomes afraid of something or afraid of stuff that they weren't normally afraid of. That can happen for usually a couple weeks at a time if it's a fear period. It could be something pain or medical related. Your dog is they were playing too rough at the dog park and with their friends, and they tweak something, but you don't quite realize it except for their changing behavior. And yeah, unfortunately, we can see reactivity pop up in adolescence. We can see resource guarding start in adolescence. So most of that, I would say we see some red flags during adolescence, but we see it really start to solidify into adulthood. So if a dog kind of barks at other dogs occasionally, and then like through adolescence, as they hit that 2 years old, their reactivity can really solidify. So, but if anybody's worried at all about your dog's behavior, please reach out to a qualified behavior consultant, and we can help you figure out what's normal, what's abnormal, what should you work towards, like should you go to the vet, and kind of navigate some of that stuff. Go ahead and stop sharing my screen. Okay, Kim asks, my dog is a thief. So I am going to go through questions that are specific, but because I think a lot of you can relate to a lot of these questions. Kim asks, my dog is a thief. Anytime a cabinet is open, he is quick to steal something out of it. What can we do for that? So stealing items is a very common adolescent behavior. I think it can be the result of a lot of different, they can have a lot of different roots. The dog can do it when they're bored. And what happens a lot of time when a dog steals something is the best thing ever happens. Somebody chases them around to get the item back. So they want your attention. They go steal the thing, and they get a great game of chase out of it. Maybe you trade them for a treat, like trade a treat for the item, which is good. I mean, we don't want to add conflict to these moments. So I think that's totally fine to do. But what my recommendation would be to skip that whole sequence together and make sure that the cabinets stay closed. I mean, truly, that's like the best way to make sure that this habit doesn't continue. Your dog is likely to grow out of it after adolescence, but if they keep having the chance to practice that behavior, once the behavior happens, it's going to be reinforced in some way. So the best thing to do to prevent the behavior from getting better, your dog getting better at the behavior getting worse, is to keep the cabinets closed. If you have to put little notes on your cabinets, please keep me closed, to help all your humans be successful, do that, set everybody up for success. Sandy says, my 16-month-old barks at me while fixing his food, jumps on people upon meeting, and pulls on leash. I have 2 older dogs, so it's hard to redirect attention elsewhere with them here. Yeah, I totally empathize when there are multiple dogs in the home, and our young dogs need our guidance, so maybe figuring out some small training sessions where you can make sure that your young dog gets their specific training, because everybody's going to have different behavior priorities. So just 5 minutes a day looking at your training goals and trying to tackle those with your young dog can really, really go a long way and help them make better behavior decisions. Okay. My dog used to lurch towards other people for attention. I was able to curb that, but he lurches towards other dogs in excitement to play with them. I think that a lot of you get this, the kind of wanting to lunge towards other dogs. And I can't seem to curb that in the same way I was able to do with people. So would this behavior decrease with maturity and effort? So essentially, my dog is pulling towards other dogs, and will this get better if with time and, as much training as I can? I do think that I don't want to say it will get better, just like period, because if you don't do anything about it, it is unlikely to get better. However, when we're dealing with these adolescents who are like, I want to see my friend, or like, blah, I want to meet that new dog, or like, blah, I want to do this, they're like, their impulses are so strong. Those impulses do start to go down as they get older. And you want to make sure that you are giving as much positive guidance as you can. When it comes to stuff our dogs want to move towards, and they're not responding to like the interventions you're trying, I would make sure that you are using your highest value treat, throw string cheese in your pocket, and then also stay a little bit further away if you can. So distance is your best friend when trying to get better behavior around distractions or triggers. The further away your dog is, the better behavior they're going to give you. And you can reward that. And then slowly over time, you can close the gap. But that's good that you've noticed that one thing worked and one thing didn't. Okay, we have a question about marking territory and objects in the house. Okay, so this is interesting. Marking is an interesting behavior. Now, I would talk to your vet. I would ask your vet if neutering would help with this. I do believe neutering, like marking, is a behavior that neutering can help with. And interesting, management's going to help with that, keeping their space a little bit smaller. So like keeping them maybe just in the living room or just in the kitchen area, smaller space can help. Interestingly, we also do see sometimes that marking can be correlated with stress. So obviously I don't know your dog at all, but if your dog runs anxious or stressy at all, that's another thing to look into, that we see an increase in marking when dogs are more stressed. That's why we sometimes will see it like when they're in a new environment, or like when people come over, dogs can sometimes start marking randomly. It can sometimes be a stress behavior. So tough to say without knowing more. Okay, everyone. Well, okay. Question about neutering a behavior. Unfortunately, y'all, as a behavior professional, I have not seen neutering change behavior. Sorry. I wish that I could tell you it would calm your adolescent down. I wish I could tell you it can improve your dog's reactivity. I historically have seen, anecdotally have seen no correlation between neutering and behavior change. Unfortunately, not even with reactivity or aggression. Although I do have to look up the data on that if we know anything. So Dan asks, this is a great technical question about loose leash walking with an adolescent dog. Basically, like you give your dog a treat on a walk for checking in and they rush ahead of you. And that can be common. So one thing that I would recommend is varying how many treats you give in a row, and then using a release word to let your dog go back up to walking a little bit ahead of you. Because remember, we don't care if they're right next to us. They can be, as long as they're not putting tension on leash, they can be wherever they want. So sometimes give one treat, sometimes give 3, sometimes give 2. And then you can also reward them for going up ahead before they catch the end of the leash. So kind of keeping your dog on their toes a little bit about what behavior and when gets them treats will help. Now, remember, everyone, we would love to give you more personalized advice. We can even just do a single consultation with you and your dog. So feel free to reach out to my company, jwdogtraining.com, and we can do a consultation. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, your dog's friend, and Nicole, for hosting today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Juliana. This was so wonderful, as your webinars always are. We so appreciate them. And thank you, everyone, for attending. You had such great questions. We are going to go ahead and conclude our webinar. Feel free to email us at info@yourdogsfriend.org if you have any questions. And thanks so much.